My name is Hans Weber, Obergefreiter of the 6th Army. It is November 1942, and I have stopped pretending that we understand this war. When we first crossed the Don River that summer, the officers told us Stalingrad would be easy. Another Russian city, another victory for the first maps. We marched through endless dust, the sun burning our necks, the smell of diesel and horse sweat in every breath. By August, we could see the smoke from the city's factories from 50 kilometers away, black towers rising into the sky like a warning. Now, 3 months later, those same factories are our graves. The tractor plant, the Red October Steelworks, the Barricade gun factory. Names every German knows because men have died for every meter of them. The Soviets fight from basements, from sewer pipes, from holes blasted in the walls. We call it Rattenkrieg, the Rat War, and it's the most fitting name I've ever heard. My platoon numbers 12 men on paper. In reality, there are 5 of us left. We sleep in the cellar of a ruined building on Krasnoarmeysk Street. They are thick with brick dust. The walls shake every few minutes as Soviet mortars hit somewhere nearby. We no longer flinch. When the bombs fall, we just wait for the dust to settle and count who's still breathing. Food comes rarely. Sometimes we receive hardtack and frozen horse meat. Water tastes of gasoline. The Russians cut off the Volga ferries, so every bullet and loaf must be flown in by Ju-52 planes when the weather allows. Lately, it almost never does. Our Lieutenant, Kruger, keeps the radio working with wires stripped from lamps. The reports from headquarters sound like another world. They say the Soviets are exhausted, that winter will finish them. But when I look through the shattered window at night, I see the opposite. Their flares light up the ruins in red and white. I hear their voices, their songs, the rumble of engines somewhere in the dark. The Russians are not finished. They are waiting. I think often of home, of my mother in Hamburg and my younger brother who wanted to join the Luftwaffe. Letters stopped arriving 2 weeks ago. Maybe the mail can't get through. Maybe there's nothing left to send. Yesterday, a captured Russian was brought in. A boy, maybe 16. His face was blue from the cold, his uniform too big for his body. He stared at us with hatred so calm it made my stomach twist. When Kruger asked where his unit was, the boy said nothing. He just smiled, blood running from his nose, and whispered something in Russian. Our interpreter said it meant, "Winter will judge you." I didn't sleep that night. The temperature dropped to -20, and frost formed on the inside of our helmets. In the morning, the city looked like it had turned to glass, ice on every brick, every corpse, every gun barrel. Beautiful and terrible. We heard distant artillery far to the north. Rumors spread. The Red Army is preparing something big, an attack on our flanks where the Romanians are stationed. The officers say it's nothing, that the enemy is too weak for a large offensive. But I've seen those flashes in the distance, like thunder behind the horizon. Something is coming, and for the first time since the war began, I feel not pride, not duty, but fear. It began before dawn on November 19, 1942. At first, we thought it was thunder, a low, rolling sound from far away. But thunder doesn't last for hours. The ground shook, and a wall of noise swallowed everything. The sky turned orange, then red, then gray with dust. That morning, the Soviets launched their great counteroffensive, Operation Uranus. They didn't attack us in the city. They went for the flanks, where the Romanian 3rd and 4th Armies were holding the line north and south of Stalingrad. Those poor men had almost no real anti-tank weapons, just old Czech guns from the last war. And against the Soviet T-34s and KV-1 South, they never stood a chance. By noon, we began hearing fragments over the radio. Russian armor breakthrough at Kletskaya, Romanians in retreat. Kruger turned pale. He slammed the receiver down and muttered, "If the flanks collapse, we're finished." At first, I couldn't believe it. We had come so far, fought so long. It didn't seem possible that the mighty 6th Army could be in danger. But the messages kept coming. Soviet tank columns were advancing fast, north and south, threatening to close behind us. 2 days later, it was no longer rumor, it was reality. The city that had been our fortress became our prison. The Red Army's northern and southern pincers met near Kalach on the Don, cutting off every road and rail line. We were trapped, nearly 300,000 men, soldiers of the Wehrmacht, Luftwaffe ground crews, Romanians, Croatians, all locked inside a frozen hell. Kruger gathered what was left of our platoon in the cellar. His hands were trembling as he unrolled a map. "We're inside the pocket now," he said. "The Fuhrer has ordered us to stand fast. Supplies will come by air." By air. We all knew what that meant. The Luftwaffe was already stretched thin. The airfields at Potomnik and Gumrick could barely handle a few hundred tons a day, far less than the 700 tons of food, fuel, and ammunition needed to keep the army alive. But none of us dared say it aloud. That night, we stood outside watching the snow fall over the ruined city. The silence felt heavier than the explosions that used to fill the sky. Somewhere beyond the smoke, the Russians were closing the circle tighter. I thought of the Romanian soldiers, those same men we had mocked for their weakness just weeks earlier. I imagined them freezing in their trenches, overrun by T-34s, screaming for help that never came. And I realized, now we were in their place. Over the next days, the temperature dropped below -25°C. The wounded froze to death in their stretchers. Horses were slaughtered for food. We stripped uniforms from the dead to stay warm. Every night, the sky filled with the droning of Soviet bombers. Every morning, fewer planes arrived from Germany. But the strangest thing was how quickly hope faded, not with panic, but with exhaustion. No one talked of victory anymore. No one even talked of home. We just existed, day to day, in the ruins of a city that devoured everything. I started writing in my notebook again, though my pencil barely worked in the cold. The first says we will hold the Volga, but the Volga no longer exists. It is just ice and death. The Russians are everywhere, yet invisible. The city has swallowed us, and it will never let us go. That night, as I fell asleep to the distant sound of Soviet artillery, I realized something simple, something terrifying. We were no longer the conquerors. We were the surrounded. December 1942. The city has turned white, but not clean. Snow lies over corpses, over burned-out tanks, over horses frozen in their harnesses. When the wind blows, the snow lifts like ash. It's impossible to tell what is smoke and what is winter. We are living like moles now. Our company, what's left of it, hides in basements, tunnels, even sewer lines. We haven't seen sunlight in weeks. When we climb out during the day, we see Russian flares drifting across the gray sky. And we dive back underground like rats. Rattenkrieg. Our food is almost gone. A daily ration now means a piece of bread the size of a cigarette packet, mixed with sawdust. We eat horse meat when we can find it, or melt snow to make soup from the bones of dead animals. Sometimes the cooks boil leather straps, anything to quiet the hunger. The airlift that the Fuhrer promised us, it's a cruel joke. They said the Luftwaffe would deliver 700 tons of supplies per day. Most days we receive less than 100. Planes rarely make it through the snowstorms and Soviet anti-aircraft fire. When they do, they bring ammunition instead of food. The wounded lie in open trucks on the airfields at Potomnik, waiting for a flight that never comes. I saw one of those planes crash last week. It was a Ju-52, hit by a Soviet fighter on approach. It caught fire before it even touched the ground. Men ran toward it with buckets of snow, but the heat was too much. The plane exploded, and for a few seconds, the flames lit the faces of everyone watching. No one screamed. We just stood there, staring at the wreckage, too tired to move. Rumors spread through the ranks like infection. Some say Field Marshal von Manstein is coming with an army from the west to rescue us. Others say it's a lie to keep us quiet. I want to believe it, God, I want to believe it, but each day feels heavier, longer, more hopeless. A week ago, a patrol from our unit went missing. They were sent to scout near the factory district and never came back. When we found them 2 days later, they were frozen solid, sitting in a destroyed half-track, their eyes open. One of them still held his rifle, aimed at nothing. We buried them under the snow. Kurger said a few words, then stopped halfway. There was nothing left to say. The cold is an enemy of its own. My hands have turned gray from frostbite. Our boots stick to the ground when we sleep. When we try to light a fire, the smoke draws artillery shells, so we shiver instead. I've stopped feeling hunger, just emptiness, a hollow place where warmth used to be. Sometimes, in the distance, we can hear the Soviet loudspeakers. They play music, waltzes, sometimes children's songs, followed by a voice speaking in German. Soldiers of the 6th Army, you are surrounded. No one is coming. Lay down your weapons, and you will live. We laugh when we hear it, but not because it's funny. We laugh because if we didn't, we would start screaming. Last night, Kurger gave us the news. Manstein's relief force, Operation Winter Storm, had reached the town of Mishkova, just 50 kilometers away. So close we could almost imagine hearing their guns. But they couldn't break through. The Soviets stopped them cold. The pocket would not be relieved. That night, I wrote in my notebook, the men still hope. But I don't. Hope is dangerous now. It makes the fall worse. The snow falls heavier each day, And I think maybe it's trying to bury us before the Russians do. In the distance, I can see red flashes, Soviet artillery, getting closer every night. The circle is shrinking. January 1943. It's so cold now that the air feels like glass in my lungs. When I breathe, it cuts. The thermometer in headquarters reads 3°C, but it doesn't matter anymore. We don't feel cold, we feel nothing. The Sixth Army is dying. Not in battle, not all at once, but slowly, in silence. Every day, the number of men who can still walk shrinks. Frostbite, hunger, exhaustion, they kill more efficiently than bullets. Our rations are gone. We eat whatever we find, frozen turnips, dog meat, soup made from wallpaper paste. Yesterday, one of the medics boiled his belt. The fat in the leather floated to the top like oil, and we shared it between 5 men. The airfields at Potomnik and Gumrick are chaos. Thousands of wounded soldiers lie in the snow, waiting for a flight that never comes. The Luftwaffe has almost stopped landing. Soviet artillery has the runways in range now. I saw a transport plane take off last week. Its landing gear barely cleared the bodies on the ground. 2 minutes later, it exploded in the sky. The smell of death hangs everywhere. Even the wind can't carry it away. We burn corpses now, not to honor them, but to keep the lice down. The smoke is thick and greasy. It clings to our skin. Our officer, Kurger, tries to keep order. He still wears his cap, still shouts orders, as if this were France or Poland. But even his voice sounds different, quieter, weaker. A week ago, he found 2 soldiers trying to steal rations from headquarters. He shot them both. No one said anything. We just watched. Some men have stopped speaking altogether. We call them the empty ones. They sit in corners, staring at nothing. When shells fall nearby, they don't move. A few wander out into the snow at night and never return. And yet, somehow, fighting continues. The Russians attack constantly, small groups, creeping through the ruins, firing from windows, crawling through the sewers. They seem tireless. Their artillery never stops. Each day, their lines move closer. 2 nights ago, they shelled our position for 5 hours. When it stopped, we crawled out of the rubble to find half the company gone. Kurger told us to dig new trenches, but the ground was frozen solid. We used our helmets as shovels until our fingers bled. At night, we listened to the radio. Berlin still calls it Fortress Stalingrad. The Fuhrer has promoted Paulus to Field Marshal, the first in German history to command a defeated army. They say no field marshal has ever surrendered, and that Paulus will not be the first. But among us, that news means something different. It means they expect us to die here. Yesterday, a rumor spread that the Russians had broken through the tractor factory district. By morning, it was confirmed. The pocket is collapsing inward. Some officers whisper that we should try to break out, but everyone knows it's impossible. No fuel, no ammunition, no strength. We are prisoners of the snow. I wrote in my notebook again last night, though my fingers can barely hold the pencil. The city is quiet now. Too quiet. The guns sound farther away, like thunder beyond the clouds. Maybe the war has already moved on and forgotten us. Maybe we're just ghosts who haven't realized it yet. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see the Volga frozen under the moonlight. On the other side, the Russians, warm fires, food, life. And on our side, the frozen silence of the dead. January 25, 1943. The map no longer makes sense. The lines have vanished. What was once a city of streets and districts is now just rubble, snow, and corpses. Every position we hold is surrounded by someone else's dead. The radio says we are still the Sixth Army, but that's a lie. We are a collection of starving men scattered through cellars and craters, holding rifles with no bullets, waiting for something, an order, a miracle, an end. The Russians attack in waves. Their artillery never stops, not even at night. The sound no longer frightens me. It's part of the air we breathe. I used to flinch with every shell. Now I just watch the ceiling dust fall, like gray snow. Yesterday, Kurger called what's left of us together. There were 8 men. He told us the Soviets have broken through to the center, splitting the city in 2. Paulus headquarters is trapped in the basement of the department store on the main square. The Univermag. The word feels strange in my mouth. They say Paulus refuses to leave, refuses to speak to anyone except Berlin. We asked if relief was still coming. Kurger didn't answer. He just looked at the ground and said, "Keep your weapon ready." But ready for what? There is no more fight left in us. That night, the Russians lit the sky again with flares, white, red, green, turning the ruins into something unreal. In that light, I saw them moving through the smoke. Soviet infantry, faces wrapped in scarves. advancing without hesitation. They looked like shadows, unstoppable and silent. We fired until our rifles clicked empty. When they reached the wall, one of them shouted in German, "Kameraden, don't shoot. It's over." His voice wasn't angry. It sounded tired like ours. Some men dropped their weapons. Others didn't move. Kurger raised his pistol but didn't fire. He just stared, shaking, as the Russians came closer. Then he turned away and sat down. I never saw him stand again. By morning, we were prisoners, though no one said the word. The Russians didn't kill us. They pointed their rifles and told us to come out with our hands up. I thought I would feel shame. Instead, I felt nothing at all. We were led through what used to be the factory district. The snow was red and black, the air heavy with smoke and rot. I saw German tanks burned down to their skeletons, horses frozen mid-step, dozens of bodies half buried in snowdrifts. The smell was so thick you could taste it. At one point, a Russian soldier offered me a piece of bread. I stared at it, afraid it was some kind of trick. When I finally took it, I realized it was warm, the first warm thing I'd held in weeks. I wanted to thank him, but my voice wouldn't work. That night, they gathered us in the open, hundreds of men shivering together under the snow. I heard someone whisper that Paulus had surrendered, that he had refused to commit suicide. Despite Hitler's orders, some said he was taken alive by the Russians in his bunker that morning, January 31, 1943. The news spread through the ranks like a ghost moving through the crowd. No one cheered. No one cried. We just looked at each other in silence, knowing what it meant. It was over. I wrote in my notebook by the light of a burning oil can, the fur made him a field marshal. So he wouldn't surrender. But he did. Maybe that means even generals can see the truth when everything else is gone. We were not fighting for glory. We were just trying to stay alive. The next day, the shooting stopped almost completely. The only sound was the wind blowing through the ruins. Somewhere in the distance, a Russian band played a slow, sad march. I thought of all the men who would never hear it. February 1943. They call it surrender, but it doesn't feel like mercy. The Russians gathered us in groups, hundreds, maybe thousands, herded between lines of soldiers with bayonets fixed. We moved slowly through the ruins of Stalingrad, stepping over bodies, burned-out trucks, and shattered helmets half buried in snow. Everywhere, the same smell, rot, smoke, fuel, and frozen blood. I tried to count the dead once, but stopped. There were too many. We marched out of the city in silence. The Soviets didn't beat us. They didn't need to. The cold did their work for them. Most of us could barely walk. Many had no boots, just rags around their feet. Some men stumbled, fell, and didn't get back up. The guards didn't even look at them anymore. We passed the frozen Volga, now glistening like steel under the weak sun. Somewhere beneath that ice lay thousands of soldiers from both sides, Germans, Russians, Romanians, all swallowed by the river. I remember thinking, maybe they were the lucky ones. After a few days, we reached a makeshift camp, nothing but open fields and wooden fences. No tents, no barracks, just snow. The Soviets called it a collection point. We called it what it was, a graveyard waiting for permission. The first night, I shared a hole in the ground with two others from my company, Ernst and Müller. We huddled together for warmth. Müller's hands were black from frostbite. By morning, he was dead. Ernst didn't say anything. He just closed Müller's eyes and started digging a shallow pit with his helmet. There were so many bodies that the ground was covered with them. A frozen carpet of gray and brown uniforms. The living stepped over the dead as if they were part of the landscape. We received one piece of bread for 2 men once a day. The water came from melted snow, yellow with ash. The guards were not cruel. They were simply indifferent. They had seen too much death to care anymore. After several days, they started moving us east. No trains, no trucks, just lines of men walking through the steppe, miles of endless white. Those who fell were left behind. The snow covered them within hours. Somewhere near Kalach, I saw something you'll never forget. A small group of Soviet soldiers sharing cigarettes with German prisoners. They laughed quietly together, as if the war were just a story someone had told them. For a moment, it felt human again. Then the column moved on, and the moment disappeared. The days blurred together. Hunger became a kind of numbness. Time no longer meant anything, just light and dark, walking and sleeping, breathing and not breathing. One morning, I woke to find Ernst gone. No one had seen him leave. His boots were still next to me, half buried in snow. I took them. I didn't feel guilt. There was no room for guilt anymore. Weeks later, we reached a railway station. They loaded us into cattle cars, 50 or 60 men per wagon. No heat, no food, no space to lie down. The doors were sealed shut. We traveled for days, maybe weeks. Some men died standing up. When the doors finally opened, the bodies were thrown out like garbage. We had arrived somewhere in the Soviet Union. None of us knew where. A guard said the word Beketovka. Later I learned it was one of the first major POW camps for the Stalingrad prisoners. They lined us up, counted us, then marched us through the gates. Above the entrance hung a sign with one word in Russian, Lager, camp. Inside, men looked like shadows, hollow eyes, skin gray with frost. They stared at us as we entered, and I realized they weren't just looking at new prisoners. They were looking at replacements. That night, I wrote my last entry before my pencil broke. I no longer think of home. Home feels like something that happened to someone else. Here, there is only the wind and the snow, and the sound of boots on frozen earth. We are ghosts walking east, and the world has already forgotten us. I don't know how long I've been here. Days blur into gray. The snow has stopped, but the cold never leaves. The camp is a fenced field of barbed wire and mud. There are wooden huts for the guards and long, low barracks for us. Inside, straw covers the floor, crawling with lice. When we move at night, the straw rustles like dry paper. They call this place Beketovka. To us it's simply the pit. Of the tens of thousands brought here from Stalingrad, many never made it through the first month. Typhus, dysentery, starvation, they sweep through the barracks like invisible fire. Each morning, carts roll by to collect the bodies. The guards no longer count them, they count who's left standing. Food is a metal bowl of thin soup, sometimes with a few barley grains. Once a week, a scrap of black bread. I eat slowly, licking every drop from the rim so nothing is wasted. Hunger becomes a rhythm. Wake, eat, swallow, sleep. The Russians running the camp are not monsters. They are young, worn out, and frightened like us. Some have lost entire families. One guard, Ivan, a farmer from near Kursk, sometimes speaks to me. His German is rough, mine worse in Russian, but we understand enough. He told me, war makes everyone hungry. You, me, even God. Then he gave me a cigarette made from newspaper and leaves. I still remember the taste, bitter, human. Work parties leave every morning. Cutting wood, shoveling snow, repairing roads destroyed by the same artillery that trapped us months ago. Those who can't work stay behind to burn lice-infested rags and bury the dead. The graves lie beyond the fence, rows upon rows marked only by sticks. When the ground is too hard to dig, we stack the bodies under snow until spring. Once, a Red Army doctor came to inspect us. He spoke through an interpreter. Those who can walk, work. Those who can't, wait. He didn't say what we were waiting for. At night, I dream of food, warm bread, butter melting into the crust. Sometimes I dream of water that isn't frozen. Then I wake to coughing and the stench of sweat and disease. We hear rumors from the guards. The Germans have been driven from the Caucasus. That there's fighting near Kursk now, far to the west. The war goes on without us. We are relics of a battle the world has already buried. Ernst is gone. He died quietly 2 nights ago, lying beside me. I didn't notice until morning his body was still warm. The guards took him away with the others. No ceremony, no name. Just another shape in the snow. The older prisoners keep track of time by carving lines into the barrack wall. The wood is filled with scratches, hundreds of them, then suddenly the counting stops. Nobody remembers which day it is or which year. Sometimes I sit outside near the fence, watching crows pick at the frozen garbage. Beyond the wire, the world looks empty and endless. I wonder if my mother still believes I'm alive. Letters aren't allowed, and even if they were, I wouldn't know what to write. Dear Mother, I am still here, somewhere east of Stalingrad. The snow has covered everything. The men die quietly. We have learned that death is slow, and silence is heavier than bullets. I never send it. The wind tears the paper from my hands. At dusk, when the guards light their fires, the camp glows faintly through the smoke. Men huddle together for warmth, faces hollow, eyes glimmering like coals. I think, this is what an army looks like when it becomes memory. Spring came late in 1943. The snow melted into brown rivers that ran through the camp, carrying away the filth and the dead. The air smelled of mud, smoke, and sickness. For the first time in months, I could hear birds. They sounded like something from another world. By then, most of the men from my original company were gone. I had stopped asking names, they came and disappeared too quickly. I learned to live quietly, to move slowly, to save every crumb. Those who moved too fast burned out like candles. That summer, they began moving us east away from the front, deeper into the Soviet Union. We were told it was for work and recovery. Some of us believed it, most didn't. They packed us into boxcars again, this time with small holes cut for air. The train rattled across endless plains, forests, and rivers, names shouted at stations I didn't recognize: Saratov, Tambov, Penza, Gorky. Each stop meant fewer men. Some died of fever, some of exhaustion, some simply stopped breathing. After weeks of travel, we arrived at another camp near the Volga-Vyatka region, hundreds of kilometers east of Moscow. It was larger, better organized, but still a prison. There, life found a new rhythm, one built entirely on work. Every day, before dawn, we marched to the forest under guard to cut timber. The axes were dull, the trees heavy with sap. We worked until our hands bled. In winter, we built roads through the snow, lines of frozen mud that disappeared with each thaw. But there were small mercies. The guards were less brutal now. Many of them were soldiers, too, veterans of the same front that had devoured us. They had seen what we had seen. One, an older sergeant named Mikhail, once told me, "You fought for your country. I fought for mine. The ground doesn't care who wins, it just keeps the bones." I didn't answer, but I remembered his words for years. In 1944, new prisoners arrived, captured at Kiev, Kharkov, and Belarus. They brought news. The Red Army was advancing west, the Wehrmacht retreating on every front. By then, even the most fanatical officers among us stopped talking about victory. Only survival mattered. We grew thinner, older. Some men learned Russian, others learned silence. I became a carpenter, repairing roofs and doors for the camp administration. It kept me alive. Work meant extra soup, sometimes a piece of bread. When the war finally ended in May 1945, we didn't celebrate. We only stared at the guards when they told us. One man whispered, "Then we can go home." No one answered, but we didn't go home. The war was over, but the captivity was not. The Soviets kept us as laborers, war reparations in human form. Some were sent to mines in the Urals, others to collective farms. I stayed at the same camp. We built warehouses, rail bridges, even a small hydroelectric station. I worked, ate, slept, and worked again. The years passed in silence. I stopped marking them after 1946. Each season looked the same: snow, mud, heat, then snow again. Sometimes, Red Cross delegations visited. We lined up in clean shirts, the guards smiled, and the soup was thicker for a day. Then they left, and life went back to normal. In 1947, I caught pneumonia. I remember lying in the infirmary, coughing until I saw stars. A Russian nurse sat by me at night, reading softly from a small book. I didn't understand the words, but her voice was warm. I think that voice saved my life more than the medicine did. By 1948, rumors spread that prisoners were being released, those proven innocent of war crimes. They said, we didn't know what that meant. None of us had ever been tried for anything. Then, in 1949, the names began to be read out loud. Men packed their things, boarded trains, and disappeared west. My name came late, in autumn. I almost didn't believe it. When they handed me a piece of paper with my name, Weber, Hans, released to Germany, I stared at it until the ink blurred from my tears. Before leaving, I found Mikhail, the guard who had once spoken about the ground keeping the bones. I said in broken Russian, "Thank you." He nodded, then handed me a small loaf of bread. "For the road home," he said. It was the first act of kindness I had seen in years. Autumn, 1949. 6 years after Stalingrad, I step off the train at Frankfurt Oder and breathe German air again. It smells of coal smoke and wet leaves, familiar, but foreign, like a dream I had once and half forgotten. The station is crowded with others like me, thin men in mismatched uniforms, faces pale and hollow, eyes staring at nothing. Soviet guards hand our papers to the German authorities, who stamp them without looking up. We're not soldiers anymore. We're simply Heimkehrer, those who came home. The city around us is rubble and silence. Germany has lost the war, the Reich has vanished, and in its place are two new nations. I have come back to what they now call the Soviet Zone, soon to be the German Democratic Republic. The people here look at us differently, not as heroes, not even as men to pity. We are reminders of something they want to forget. The journey from the station to my hometown takes 2 days by train. The landscape passes slowly, burned villages, empty fields, factories without roofs. The war has ended, but the wounds are still open. When I finally arrive, nothing is as I remember it. The church steeple is gone, bombed flat. The street where my family lived is full of weeds. Only one house still stands, the neighbor's. I knock on the door. An old woman opens it, looks at me, and gasps. "Hans," she says, Her voice shakes. We thought you were dead. My mother had died in 1945, hunger and grief, the woman says. My sister fled west before the Soviets came. No one knows if she survived. I walk to what used to be our home. The roof is gone, the windows boarded. I sit in the ruins and take the small loaf of bread Mikhail gave me months ago. It's hard now, almost stone, but I can't throw it away. I break off a piece and eat it slowly, tasting the silence. For weeks, I live as a shadow among the living. The authorities give me a work permit and assign me to a sawmill. The men there are polite, distant. Some served on the Western Front, some never fought at all. When they hear Stalingrad, they fall quiet. One says, "You're lucky to be alive." I don't feel lucky. I feel old, older than my years. At night, I dream of snow. Not the snow of home, but that endless white over the Volga. I see faces, Kurger, Ernst, Muller, all standing in the blizzard, waiting for me. Sometimes I wake up shouting. In the mornings, I walk to the river and watch the fog rise. There's a peace in it, but also a distance, as if the world I knew was still frozen somewhere far away. One day, a letter arrives from the Red Cross. Inside is a list of names, survivors from Beketovka Camp No. 108. I scan it quickly. My name is there. Out of hundreds, maybe thousands, only a handful returned. Later, a government official visits the sawmill to interview me. He asks about my time in captivity, what work we did, how we were treated, if I witnessed crimes. I answer truthfully. We worked. We starved. We buried each other. That was all. He writes something in his notebook, thanks me, and leaves. In the years that follow, Germany begins to rebuild. Streets come back, children laugh again, and people stop talking about the war. But I can't escape it. The sound of a hammer hitting steel makes me flinch. The smell of wood smoke takes me straight back to the camp. Sometimes I walk through the town square, and I see soldiers from the new East German army. Young men in gray uniforms, clean faces, proud. They salute each other, their boots sharp on the pavement. I wonder if they know what those boots will one day walk through. I try to write again, small notes, fragments of memory. I write, I went to war as a soldier, I returned as a witness. The battle ended in 1943, but inside me, it never stopped. One night, I visit the cemetery. There are new graves, but I find a small stone marked Unknown Soldier, 1943. I kneel beside it and place the last piece of Mikhail's bread there. It feels like the right thing to do. When I leave, the sky is gray, the wind cold, but for the first time in years, I don't feel afraid of winter. The years pass quietly now. The war feels like another lifetime, something I dreamed long ago. But sometimes, when I wake before dawn, I can still smell the smoke of Stalingrad, hear the wind across the steppe, and feel the hunger inside my bones. Time dulls the pain, but it never erases it. It is 1962. I live alone in a small flat near Leipzig. I work as a carpenter still, repairing furniture for people who never ask about my past. My hands shake now, the knuckles swollen and stiff from frostbite that never healed properly. I keep them busy, wood, nails, silence. That's enough. Once a year, I travel west, to the cemetery near the old church. I leave a small wooden cross on the grave marked Stalingrad, 1943, for Kurger, for Ernst, for Muller, and for the millions who never came home. I know no one else will do it. Sometimes school children visit veterans, asking to hear stories from the war. They expect heroism, victories, medals, tales of bravery. I tell them instead, the war taught me that courage is not fighting without fear. It's surviving with shame, and still choosing to live. They don't understand. Maybe that's for the best. The world has changed. Germany is split in two, yet both halves are building, smiling, pretending the past can be measured in maps and dates. People talk about the miracle of recovery, but I've seen what can't be rebuilt: the faces, the silence, the bones buried under every road we walk. In my room, on the shelf, I keep a few things. My release paper from the Soviet Union, a small piece of wood I carved in the camp, shaped like a bird, and a faded scrap of paper, written in pencil. We are ghosts walking east, and the world has already forgotten us. I wrote that in 1943. 4 years I thought it was true. Now, I'm not so sure. Sometimes, I receive letters from other survivors, men who were in the same camps, the same ruins. They write about their families, their grandchildren, their quiet lives. They sign their names with shaky hands. Each letter feels like a voice calling through the snow. You are not alone. When I walk through the park, I see children playing soldiers, shouting bang and boom. I want to tell them that war isn't noise, it's silence. The silence after the guns stop. the silence when no one answers. At night, I sit by the window and watch the rain. I think of Mikhail, the Russian guard who gave me bread. I think of the nurse who read to me while I coughed in the infirmary. I think of the men who shared their last crumbs without a word. It's strange, the faces of kindness are the ones that never fade. I'm an old man now. My body is failing, but my memory is sharp, sharper than I want it to be. Sometimes I wonder why I survived when so many better men didn't. I never find an answer. Before I sleep, I whisper a small prayer, not to God, but to the past. Forgive us all. We were young. We didn't know what we were destroying or what we were becoming. And when the wind blows against the window, I can almost hear it, the echo of distant marching, the faint hum of engines buried under time. But it no longer frightens me. It's just memory now. And memory, I've learned, is both punishment and peace. Hans Weber died quietly in 1965, in Leipzig. His story, like those of many who returned from Stalingrad, was never told publicly, but in every survivor's silence. There was a truth the world needed to hear, that war does not end when the fighting stops. It ends when someone remembers.